listening to Artist Kaleidoscope with Nancy Tansy Busher. Our guest today is Dr. Robert Krupp. He's author and teacher. He travels extensively promoting his books, and he's in his 65th year of teaching science and math. His children's books encourage readers to grab a grown-up, do some cool experiments, and children learn about science. What got you on this path to writing for children?
I never thought I would write a book or planned to write a book. About 5 years ago, I was at the graduation of my granddaughter from kindergarten. I brought her a bouquet of roses. I'm sitting there during the celebration and the festivities, and I'm thinking, what more could I give her? I didn't want to give her a cuddly animal or a dress or anything like that. And then it suddenly dawned on me, why don't I give her what I know? And what I know is science. Now, I have to tell you, I didn't go out and write immediately, but the idea was there. And a few months later, I had some time when I was out visiting a friend in Arizona, and I started writing just little short stories, ideas of mine about where I could tell her a little bit about some science things, and maybe we would do some simple experiments in the kitchen. I wrote about 10 of these short stories. I thought at the time I might publish each story as a book in itself. As I moved on and began to work with a publisher, we decided to put the 10 stories in one book. And so that's how I came out with my first book. So I got started.
I look at your first book as kind of an introduction to science and your approach with children. How do you feel about that?
Yes, I would agree. And I think all of this is a learning process. I'm learning different things. I'm not an artist. I cannot do graphics, but I've changed some things and I think improved things. I started showing pictures from the internet instead of drawings, and I've been using more and more pictures to explain what they see so they understand. But we still do experiments. The stories are written in conversational fashion.
It's dialogue-based.
Dialogue-based, yes.
Yeah.
The one story I just started to refer to is we're together one morning having breakfast, and I say to her, have you ever heard of Little Miss Muffet? And of course she smiles and repeats the nursery rhyme to me. I ask her, what's a tuffet? What are curds and whey? And she responds, I don't know, what are they? And I show a picture what a tuffet is, and then I say, let's go into the kitchen and make curds and whey. And with simple materials in the kitchen, we use cups, funnels, coffee filters, paper towels.
Anything
milk.
you would find around the kitchen.
Everything you want to find around the kitchen.
Right.
And so we make curds and whey. We separate the curds from the whey. The whey is the liquid, the curds are the solid. We do one other little experiment. We take the curds and sprinkle a little baking soda on it. It becomes very sticky, like Elmer's glue. So it becomes
Really?
a paste. Yes. I have her stick some paper together to show that it works as a glue.
Now, I didn't know that.
So we do these little things. In my second book, again, just to kind of give you a flavor of how I proceed, the first story is called The Cloud. Laura with her cousin are sitting in the shade of a beautiful elm tree on a lovely spring day, looking up at puffy white clouds. Grandpa, of course, me, are sitting on the porch reading my book. Laura calls out to Grandpa, where do clouds come from? So 1,800 words later, we finished the story.
Oh, you know, how fun that is. Because I deal a lot with writers and artists, I'm seeing so many of our older generation, they are so full of information. They can remember what their grandparents said. I guess you brought this to mind when you talked about the tuffet and the curds and whey, because today's child would not know that. I'm not sure people in our generation know that.
Right.
I taught for just a couple years at the Montessori school. I realized that 5-year-old children today, they don't know what an LP record is. They don't know what a phonograph is. Simpler things. Handheld telephone receivers, most of them don't know that because they're so used to their folks having cell phones. And obviously, they grow up with a computer. Oh my gosh, society has changed so much in our generation.
I agree. And again, my stories, and you remind me of other things I have written, some are not yet published. The young people today do not know some of the things we know. For example, a story I have not published yet, but it's been written and almost ready to go, is called The Fuse. Now, you probably remember, I know I remember, when in your home, if lights went out, you might have burned out a fuse.
Oh, okay.
And you would go to the fuse box and screw in, like a light bulb, a fuse. Nowadays, modern homes have circuit breakers.
Oh, yeah.
And that comes into the story at the end, but I explain what the purpose of a fuse is. I have pictures of the old fuses. But fuses are still used today in automobiles. You may have heard of fuses in your electrical system.
Mm-hmm.
It's a safety device, and it's found in every electrical component. Many times today, the fuses are built into the system to protect it. So write that story.
My granddaughter was always terrified of lightning and thunder. I love it. I'll open the sliding glass doors and just sit there and listen, enjoy the light show during a thunderstorm. I don't know why she was afraid, except maybe the sound.
I mentioned that in my second book there was a story of the cloud. Well, to end a story, a good teacher usually asks, do you have any questions? And as my grandson is in that story, he asks me, what about hail? And I say to him, that's a very good question. Let's leave that for another day. Well, later on in book 2, I have a story on hail. And what reminded me of something you just said, the story on hail, I have an explanation of what lightning is and what thunder is and how it's produced. And I try again, explain it in simple words. There's no mathematics in it. There's no equations. There's no formulas that I'm using to describe it, but try to describe in simple words the formation of lightning, and that they might relate that to that, and then the sound of thunder.
Oh, I think that's wonderful, and such a good subject for young ones, because I think they will not be afraid, or at least they'll be less afraid, if they know what it actually is.
Yes.
You know, the business, what was it they'd tell us? It was giants bowling or
something like that. Yeah.
You know, you might listen to that when you're 5 years old, but by the time you're 7, you know that's not right.
Right. And actually, you know, it, in one sense, it's a shock wave. People sometimes hear shock waves from fast-moving airplanes when they exceed the speed of sound. That can produce a shock wave. Thunder is formed somewhat similarly in that the lightning heats the air very rapidly around it. But then in these storms, there's often cool air around, and that quickly cools the heated air. So the rapid heating and cooling of the air is what makes the shock wave of sound, of thunder.
Yeah, so it's like an explosion then.
Yeah, the lightning explosion heats the air very, very, very rapidly.
I'm going to have to read that book. Now, I know you have some other things going on. Tell me about what you have coming up.
Well, I published my third book. That has just come out.
Now, what's the title of that? I'm not familiar with that one.
These are a series of books. I call them all the same title. Laura and Grandpa
is the series.
Discovering Science Together. And then there was book 1, then book 2, and now book 3.
Okay.
And they're just simple science stories that I kind of bounce around. They don't necessarily follow each other because my background is chemistry and physics, astronomy, meteorology. So I get a thought and I write.
Well, that's good. Then they stand alone and you don't have to read them in order.
Right.
Yeah.
However, I'm in the process of start a new series. The series will be called somewhat similarly, Laura and Grandpa Discovering Da Vinci Together.
Ooh.
I selected that, about 4 or 5 months ago in the middle of November here in Bradenton, Florida. There's been an exhibit of the Da Vinci machines. When my granddaughter was down for spring break, I took her there, took some pictures, and had the idea that maybe this is another story I could write, a little different vein. It'll be written for maybe a little older child. Initial series, Laura and Grandpa, I write for the 5 to 8-year-old child. while.
Okay.
This new series, I think, will be for maybe 7 to 11, maybe 12. I explain the science behind some of Da Vinci's inventions. Many of his inventions were not made. He made the drawings. He was an amazing genius.
Yes.
Who lived over 500 years ago. I'm getting into that now.
Gosh, you make science sound so exciting.
It is. It's the world.
Yes,
it's our
it is.
planet. It's our universe. It's understandable.
Now with cable television, they have networks now that deal with science. Very likely that could be the only thing our children have to learn science. I know in the Florida schools, they don't have time for it anymore. They're too busy trying to teach them how to read. FCATS worked real well when they created the rule where you have to give the child 90 minutes of uninterrupted reading during a school day. The next year, the math grades fell lower. And then they said, oh, well, now we're going to have to concentrate on math. Well, they're so busy with math and reading and the FCATS that they're not getting geography, they're not getting science, they're taking away the arts.
See, that's where I would hope someone would recognize where my books fit in. Because if they teach reading, and that's emphasized, and I'm not faulting, I'm not saying they shouldn't teach reading. They should teach reading.
Yes.
They should teach writing. But why couldn't they read about science?
Exactly.
For example, the story I referred to about clouds. If the teacher were to read that story to them, or they read it together, their vocabulary would be enhanced, because what I go through in there is solid, liquid, and gas. I explain what those three phases of matter are in simple terms and relate it to things they have seen. I then write about, and they would read about how a solid could change to a liquid could change to a gas. And a gas could go back to a liquid, and a liquid could go back to a solid. And I relate it to things they have seen. So that could be the reading.
Yes.
And here, after reading this story, maybe once or twice, their vocabulary has been enhanced, and they begin to understand some of the things they see.
Yes.
For example, I'll just use one specific example. I asked one of the children in the story, have you ever seen anybody change a liquid to a solid? And I think it's McKinley, Laura's cousin, is in this story. She says, oh yeah, I've seen my dad take an ice cube tray, and I have a picture of an ice cube tray, fill it up with water. I have a picture of water from a faucet filling up an ice cube tray. In the story, he puts it in the fridge, and later on we get ice cubes, and I have a picture of ice cubes. And I say, an excellent example, wonderful example, good example, you've seen it. Then I say, you could have picked another one. Supposing we took liquid cream and changed it to a solid called ice cream. And I have a picture of a ice cream cone, which children relate to.
Oh, yeah.
I have a picture of a puppy dog with a piece of some ice on his nose.
He's been sampling, too.
He's been sampling, too. And then to reinforce that point, my granddaughter says to me, oh, is that the same thing that happens in the winter when the pond freezes over and becomes solid ice and my dad takes me ice skating? Now, of course, in Florida, that has no meaning. But
Don't see it very
children from the north, especially this winter,
Oh, yes.
the ponds and lakes have frozen over.
At our lake in northern Indiana, about midwinter, you could drive your car onto the lake.
Yep. See, again, what I'm trying to do, and I have pictures, and look, you've seen this. Liquids can change to solid if they get cold enough. Now, we can go the other way. We can melt it.
Yes.
Ice cubes can melt back to water. That's what I try to take them through, and
Okay,
that's the
now.
reading. That's the reading.
Now, how are you going to turn that into a gas?
Oh, all right. The story there is, have you ever seen a liquid change to a gas? Maybe so. One of the children said, I remember my mother was boiling in a teapot, making a cup of tea, and I have a picture of steam coming out of a teapot. And then what happened? Well, she got a phone call, and she forgot about it. And later on, she went, and the water was all gone.
Like magic.
Yeah. Had to throw the pot away, too.
Oh.
So, and I have pictures, of a steam kettle and stuff like that. So then I asked them, well, where do you think all the liquid water went? And they think a minute, well, could it have evaporated and gone into the air? Air is a gas, and that's what happens. That's water vapor. See, I need to get that to water vapor and that idea because that's part of the story of how clouds form.
Yes.
Water vapor from lakes and ponds is heated and then rises up. And as it goes higher up, it's cold up there. It begins to condense. That I get into condensation. That vocabulary word comes up in the reading. Mm-hmm. And I have pictures of condensation from a can taken out of a refrigerator that sits. That's very cold. You might get moisture on it. Mm-hmm. Pictures, people in the north would know this. In the wintertime, sometimes your windows
will ice up,
condense a little bit. So I bring across the idea then that the water vapor, which is a gas mixed in with the air, can suddenly go back to a liquid. And that's how clouds form. They're literally little tiny drops of water that have gone back from being a gas to a liquid.
Isn't it amazing? I saw something on, it must have been the Science Channel. He was talking about sound waves. With computers now, he's showing us what sound waves would look like if we could see them. Mm-hmm. It would be interesting if we could see air, what it would look like.
Yeah.
And of course, all the other things that are in the air, other gaseous forms like water evaporation.
Yeah, that too is in the story on clouds. I try to get across, but it's part of the reading. Because again, we're talking about solid, liquid, gas, and I try to relate things to things that children experience. And I asked one of the children, can you walk through a liquid? Well, of course, I go to the beach all the time, and I run in the ocean. Mm-hmm. And I have pictures of girls running on the beach, on the sand, in the water. So you can run through water. Can you run through a gas? They think about it a bit, and they said, well, we do it all the time when we walk through air, and we do. We literally live in a sea. Scientists sometimes use the expression, we live in a sea of air, like fish live in a sea of water. I use those words, and again, part of the pictures I try to show them is a picture of a school of fish swimming in the ocean or a lake. But right next to it is a picture of hundreds of people walking in downtown Manhattan. Again, to try to get across the concept to them, the fish are swimming in their environment, the ocean. People are walking about, living, existing, running through a sea of air.
I have never looked at it that way before.
But it's true.
I don't know that I've ever thought of air being a gas until you mentioned that.
But see, there are other gases. We've heard about carbon dioxide, produced from engines of cars, and people breathing, that's a gas. Every time you exhale, you're exhaling a gas. Every time you breathe in, you're breathing in a gas.
You know, there's always been so much talk about, do you suppose that there is life on other planets? I have to laugh. No doubt about it. The thing is, they don't live in oxygen like we do. They don't live in water like we do. We probably wouldn't even recognize them if we were there.
Right, that's it. Yeah.
Your books have won several awards.
Yes, the first two books have won awards from an organization called Mom's Choice Awards. They're an international organization headquartered in Alexandria, Virginia, or somewhere in Virginia. They have members in 41 countries, so it's an international organization. They have over 200,000 members. Their main purpose, as I understand it, is to look at and approve things for children. Clothing, toys, furniture, whatever, including literature.
Yes.
So my first two books have been reviewed by them. When they send me the announcement, they tell me the team of people who critiqued it, they're all
judges?
Ladies.
Oh.
They're all professional ladies. Some are doctors. They're in the entertainment industry.
Oh, their careers are all varied.
Yes, yes.
But they're all women?
Yes, they're all women.
Okay.
I'm not a member. They've never asked me to be a member.
Yeah.
I may be falsely assuming that they're all women, but
that sounds like it.
Of course, it makes sense. A mom's choice, if they're going to be looking at things for children and approving them, that mothers might be the ones who are most interested in seeing that this was done properly.
We know that you travel extensively. Very wisely, too, because you go when it's so hot here. About your contact information and how people can get your books.
I have a website, www.all lowercase lauraandgrandpa.com.
Okay.
they can contact there. The books are available on Amazon.com. The first 2 books are available in Kindle. I haven't arranged the 3rd book yet. That's one of the things I've got to do in the next week or so, that the 3rd book will be available in Kindle.
I was wondering if that was going to be an ebook. That was no problem, huh?
Well, I've heard that it is because of a formatting process. What can happen with Kindle is when the reader is allowed to change the size of the font, that can mess up the graphics and the pictures. I guess that doesn't come through so well. However, I've recently begun looking at, I can't say I'm ready to publish it, but I'm hoping to redo some of my stories with different pictures and have it in the form of an iBook, so that if you have an iPad, you can get them through an iStore.
Oh, I see. It's an ebook, but it's just a different formatting.
Right. The iBook technology is through Apple.
Yes.
It's an Apple Macintosh. They have iTunes, where you can get music through this. In fact, that's where it's used most often by people. But there is a segment where they have iBooks. And there have been some books put on there. It's a different way of getting your pictures and your graphics on than many of our artisans are familiar with.
Yes. Technology is continuing to change by the moment.
I know.
When I graduated from college, I went back and graduated in 2010. I said, okay, that's it. I'm not studying anything else. I'm not learning anything else. I'm just going to relax. There's no way. Even sitting at your computer, all of a sudden my computer is collecting my pictures differently. And so I'll save something as a JPEG, and then I try to pull it up. It's in a different format. And it doesn't click like I'm accustomed to, and it becomes very frustrating.
I know, but we mentioned earlier that I've been teaching for 65 years. When I began teaching, technology was a piece of chalk, a blackboard, and a slide rule. In the middle of my career, I ventured into television, and I did over 90 lectures on public broadcasting in the Midwest science course lectures. But nowadays, I teach on the internet. I use the computer. That's how technology has advanced. I've tried to keep up with it, but I don't know everything. They keep changing it on me, as you say.
Or they keep coming up with new things. Children today, their hand-eye coordination is so much greater than ours was or is. We had the typewriter where you moved your fingers quickly.
Right.
These children, they're learning to read more quickly, react more quickly because of the video games and everything.
Yes.
You know what? 25 years from now, you and I wouldn't even recognize it. If we closed our eyes and opened them again 25 years from now, we wouldn't be able to get around because things will have changed so much.
That's right.
More than likely, we wouldn't even be able to read. With texting, they're starting to use shortcuts. Schools are no longer teaching cursive.
That's what I was just going to mention. Because of the computer and texting and all that, schools don't teach cursive writing anymore.
Yeah. I envision in our future, everything will be specialized.
Possibly so.
So is there any message you would like to give our listening audience before we finish here?
Well, we're talking about technology and all the children. If we can get them away from doing all the social texting. I've listened to a lecture I mentioned from the Da Vinci exhibit. They have a guided tour. Docent who gives it, he says, when he talks to children, turn off the phones. What he's referring to is all this social activity or entertainment activity, playing games, just playing games, using that. As you mentioned, they're so skilled in doing things very quickly because they play the games. We can't fault that. That's good. But got to start using your head a little bit. You got to read. You got to think. You got to understand. We got lots of problems out there that we want you to solve.
That's right.
I know you mentioned, I hear this many times when I go to events at the South Florida Museum. People are very interested in other life forms out in other planetary systems. Listen, before we get there and solve the way to get there, we ought to solve cancer, our energy problem, among other things.
Oh, yeah.
It's the younger generation that'll do this. But you don't begin doing it by spending all your time socially communicating.
Yes. Yeah, it's another form of relaxation.
Well, we
watching
can relax,
television.
but
The same thing. You're not can learn now with cables the way they're set up. You can find educational television. My brother and sister just recently connected me with television. They thought I was missing something in my life because I didn't have television. And I told them, I said, I don't have time. Well, I do watch from time to time, but I will surf the channels. The majority of things on there deal with murder, rape, savagery. The Kardashians are
Right.
the role models today. Scares me to death. And then I hear myself say, oh yeah, well, you old people, you always think the younger generation are going to be ruined. And that's true through history. The older generation has always worried.
right, that's true. But no matter what the younger generation says about this, they are the ones that are going to have to solve these problems. So if you start talking politically, economically, medical problems, like I mentioned, cancer, look at the wonderful things that have happened. And I'm not defending the war, but we're seeing that veterans coming back from the war, military people that have lost limbs and legs, how they're giving them prosthetic devices. They're walking, they're running.
Yeah.
Things like that have brought back some semblance of quality of life to those victims. That has only been developed in the last 30 or so years. I don't recall, you won't recall in your time, people, who lost a limb, a leg or two, running around like they do today.
I saw an interview one time with this woman who had been a model, and she was in this terrible accident and lost a leg. Because her livelihood was modeling, they gave her a prosthetic leg so that she could still model, I don't know, bathing suits? I don't know. I thought, oh my gosh, what a
Right.
wonderful advancement that is.
Right.
And hands, they have prosthetic hands now.
Right, right.
You can pick things up without.
Now, again, who's doing that? That's been done by younger people than us,
Yes.
a little older, maybe the parents of the children. The parents of today's children have been the ones who maybe developed these newer prosthetic devices and have given a better quality of life to primarily men, but some women now who have lost limbs.
Well, farming accidents.
Farming accidents as
Automobile
well.
accidents.
Yeah. Other problems that our society faces, our country faces, are going to have to be solved by the ones coming up.
And they have to know how to read to do that.
Don't be afraid of mathematics. You need to solve problems, and many problems involve mathematics
Almost everything does.
in one way or another. Yeah.
Well, I appreciate you coming and spending some time with me this morning. And
Thank you for having me.
I am thrilled with your books. With a little bit of luck, we'll get them into the schools, and that would be a wonderful advancement for the children, the students.
Hopefully so.
Hopefully so. Thank you, and we'll talk again sometime.
Okay.
Thank you for joining us. This is Artist Kaleidoscope with Nancy Tansy Busher.